On a cliff overlooking the far horizon, a pinnacle of stone towers above the forest around it. The white clay shines in the dawn, and at the peak of this tower of stone, above the swirling stone ramp that leads to its summit, is a bronze wedge 20 feet across. From the distance it catches the light, and just faintly can be heard the rumble of thunder, the crash of lightning. Hello adventurers and welcome back to the Red Quills. My name is Ryan, and in this week we'll be finishing up our latest series in which we've been drawing the various maps that you can use for different kinds of adventures, and I've been talking about the aspects as I go of how to create those different kinds of adventures. And in this case, we'll be capping it off with a reference to one of the most popular maps from last year, the map of the Tor network. Now in that map I described how these ancient cylindrical structures used to be used by the ancient giants as a method of teleportation. You could use lightning travel to move from one celestivere to another. And in this quest, we're going to talk about how a cult, which worships the idea of the storm giants, has found out how to use these towers and is using them as a base of operations for bandit attacks so they can move very quickly through the kingdom. So the players will be forced to find out where these attacks are coming from, understand the history of the towers, make it all the way there with some optional encounters along the way as they move through the forest and up the cliffs, and then finally move through the entire bandit camp to the summit where they encounter the wizard who learned how to use these in the first place. I'm also going to give some options as to how you can make this into a larger quest, but overall I'm going to make two maps for this. In previous videos I've made a combination of grid maps, isometric maps of towns, and the wilderness maps to give you an idea of what it looks like in its context. But in this particular case, all I'm going to make are two grid maps. And that reason for that is, of course, these are going to be very large grid maps. I'm going to make one grid map which has the base and then the summit of the Tower of Dawn, which is the particular setting in this case, and another map which is a conglomeration of the various encounters you can have on the way to the tower. And those encounters are outlined in the adventure module that's available for free to pair with these maps. You can download it through the link in the description below. But it's an idea that I got on the Red Quills Discord forum from a friend of mine, John, who makes these kinds of things for his own players. And the concept is really quite simple. You take a very large canvas and you draw in different settings on the same map so that you can then take a small part of that map and blow it up and add a grid over the top of it and use that individually. It saves you from drawing 6 or 7 different maps and having to create a lot of filler content that you'll never really use in the end. But we'll get to that in a moment. And before we do, I need to make the first map. So I'm going to start by penciling out a grid first because I'll use that as a reference. And what I'm going to do first is outline the tower itself. So there are two areas on the tower, and that's the problem with any three-dimensional structure, is the bottom of the tower is the bandit camp, where most of the combat will take place. And the top of the tower is the summit around the Celestivere, in which the players will have the opportunity to roleplay and ask a few questions and get some context before encountering the villain of this particular adventure. Now, it's not a very complicated or excessively long adventure. It'll just require a little bit of initial investigation and then a fair amount of combat. In the past, we've always done a mixture of what's expected of players, thinking outside the box, dealing with people, exploring, puzzle solving. But now this is really just about combat. It won't be difficult for them to gather the information they need. They'll have different encounters along the way. They can find allies, they can get more information if they need it, but if they want to go through sword swing right from the beginning to the end of this particular quest, then that's going to be no problem at all. So this is the perfect kind of encounter if you find that your players are really just itching for some more combat. So to that end, the maps are not particularly complicated, especially not the map of the Tower of Dawn, which is the base. It's a rather large, open area. It has an exterior and an interior. It has a few clues and some supplies that your players might be able to use, but it is really just the antechamber to the top where the boss battle will take place. And the boss battle at the top of the tower has the option for some roleplay as well. The players can ask questions, they can get some context, and the boss will try to buy some time while he's waiting for his big bad plan to pay off. Because the brains of this operation, the wizard named Brevak, has managed to figure out how to access the power of the Celestiviers. He's taken over a local cult and a bandit clan, and he's enriching himself by teleporting people instantaneously from his base of operations to any of the towers along the network. And this is just one of them. His latest experiment is how he can move more than a small group at any one time. He wants to move everyone in a given area all at once to the next tower along. And in order to do that, he has several other mages helping him to create a large lightning strike. If the lightning strike hits, anyone touching the Celestivier will be teleported, but it doesn't go precisely according to plan. It does break the Celestivier in the end and doesn't achieve Brevak's final end goal, which is to move everyone on the tower. It only moves people who are touching the Celestivier. Now, the Tower of Dawn is the focus of the worship of the Cult of the Storm, which is a group of fanatics who believe in the superiority of the giant kin races, the giants, the Goliaths, and then the humans. They believe that the runic magic that the giants use is superior to our own, and because of their ardent worship of the tower network, they will follow Brevak, who has learned to uncover its secrets with a deep fanaticism, an almost worshipful attitude. And so before the players can approach the top of the Tower of Dawn, they need to move through the forests of the White Downs from Lodban to the tower and encounter the cultists on the way and all of the various ways in which they have disrupted the local communities. They can encounter the patrols of the bandits who work as the military arm. They can encounter rituals in the forest being performed by the cults who want the benevolence of the giants. They can encounter a giant who is sleeping, a stone giant who can provide them with some more context about the site, as well as the odd unrelated encounter, which can add a little bit more depth to the area. And so overall, my aim was to create a moderately open world that can be explored, a very simple quest of getting from point A to point B and then defeating Wizard C. On the way, there are several quests, but it depends entirely on how the players feel, and every encounter along the way is combat-based. And so to do that, this kind of map, the one in which I've just created one enormous A2 grid map, really works out. As you can see, in several areas on the map, I've outlined the different kinds of encounters. The stone circle, the clearing in which several standing stones can be found, the depression in which a stone giant is sleeping, the path along the cliffs where they can find a patrol, a bundle of rocks where they can find a dire wolf. All of which I can draw on the same page, fill out the middle with some trees, and then use later on as individual encounters. But it saves me from having to draw the 8 or 9 different grid maps that I would need to make for this, or finding 8 or 9 different grid maps. If you like making your own encounters like this out in the open world, I would very much recommend a method like this. I used a combination of acrylic pens and fineliners for details here, but you can use pencils or watercolors if you'd like. But either way, don't expect it to be a very quick process. It certainly doesn't take as long as making 8 or 9 different grid maps, but it's not very fast if you want to add the details in like I have here. And so then, we're pretty much done. There's only 2 maps in this particular encounter. Both of them are grid maps because it's a very simple adventure. The adventure module has a lot more details about the people that you encounter, where you can get certain clues and some handouts, as well as sketches of the area that they can use to get more context. But overall, it's a very simple quest. We're not dealing too much here with intrigue or puzzle solving. It is just the opportunity to explore the world and maybe take out a few bad guys along the way. If your players want something a little more simple, then this is something for them. Now, as I mentioned before, the adventure module is available on the Patreon page through the link in the description below. If you have any questions, you can definitely comment it below. I welcome any world building or map making questions that you may have. Any like or comment is very appreciated and helps this video to move on to other people who can use it. But you could also follow the link in the description to our Discord server, where we host discussions about map making and world building and other tools that you can use to expand your own fantasy worlds. In addition, I'm going to be uploading a special treat for my subscribers on Patreon in the form of Atlas excerpts for the town of Lodban, for the White Downs, and for the Tower of Dawn itself. And I will be adding over the next couple of months more details on the tower network as a whole, which we referenced in the earlier video, making mythology for your D&D world. So if you like that kind of thing, you can check out my Patreon page. Overall, thank you so much for watching this series. I hope it's been helpful. I welcome any feedback that you might have. We'll be moving on to a new topic soon, but in the next video, I'll be discussing the upcoming projects that we may have and what you can expect in the coming months. Thank you for watching, and good luck on your own adventures. I'll catch you next week. Happy mapping.